Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. On the program today, we're going to be trying to break the silence on a taboo topic. And that topic is that what happens to your spouse is no longer here. We're going to learn about what it is like to be a spouse of someone who has Alzheimer's disease. It is estimated that more than 50 million people are living with Alzheimer's disease, but the staggering statistic falls to incorporate the invisible victims, the tens of millions of loved ones whose lives are forever altered by this debilitating disease. Joining us here on the program today is author of the book Bleeding Hearts. It's a true story of Alzheimer's, family, and the other woman. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Tammy Reeves. Tammy, thank you for taking the time to be on the program today.
Well, thank you for having me.
This memoir here is certainly something that grips somebody coming right out of the gate when you see this beautiful love that happens between a young man by the name of Eric and a wonderful young woman by the name of Gay. You know, you look at this and you think, man, you got it all, and then something happens that you just don't expect, and then it keeps going deeper and deeper and deeper. Now, we have covered this subject, Alzheimer's, a few different times here on the program, but this really gripped me because of the personal story that you share here. Let's talk about how this all started for you.
Well, when I came out of a marriage, a 25-year marriage, I separated from my husband and was on a dating website and met Eric. And within about 20 minutes of dating him, he told me about his wife, Gay, that she was in a nursing home with early onset Alzheimer's. She was diagnosed at the age of 48 years old, so she was quite young. She had been showing some symptoms well before that, but that's when they got the diagnosis. And so the story, Bleeding Hearts, goes from that period. The first few chapters do talk about our past before we met, but the rest of the book is about our journey until his wife's death and a little bit afterwards.
Now, first of all, from your experience, how did you experience Alzheimer's in this particular situation?
In this situation, I'm a nurse. I'm a registered nurse, but I did trauma and pediatrics. I didn't really work with any Alzheimer's patients, but I had never heard of early onset Alzheimer's, and as he explained it to me, I was mortified. I didn't know that people got it so young, and actually, I've heard of some people not too long ago that are quite younger. A 32-year-old woman in Canada has it. So my dealing with the Alzheimer's came a little bit later. You know, once our relationship started going, and then he introduced me to her, she was pretty much gone, didn't know anybody at that point. But he took me to the nursing home to meet her, and that was really the first time I'd really been one-on-one with somebody with Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm. And as you were saying, you're a nurse, and you were certainly a nurse then, so you were a caregiver. And just to give people a little background, you were also the daughter of parents who were deaf. And so you came to see, as you were growing up, the world and how diverse people actually were. And it was very unique as you step into this new family, if you will, that they didn't have those kinds of views. And so you felt that could be kind of a challenge as you came into this relationship.
It absolutely can be, and I think that that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, was when the spouse or partner of an Alzheimer's patient wants to find companionship, a lot of times the family who keeps them from doing it, or their colleagues or their friends, may say something that makes them feel shameful for even thinking that. So a lot of times that is the issue, and you're right. Let me step back a little bit. I did grow up as a CODA, a child of deaf adult, and because of that diverse world that I grew up in, I have been very open and accepting with many, many different people, relationships, and what have you. So for me, this wasn't a big deal when I stepped into these shoes. But what was the clincher for me when I first began this relationship was that Eric told me his daughter, a year before he had gone on the dating service, the online dating service, tried to get him to move on because they had all said their goodbyes to Gay around that time, maybe a little bit before, because she was slipping away and wasn't knowing anybody anymore. So it was actually his daughter who encouraged him to do this, and then when he finally felt ready a year later, she was the one who actually put his profile on the website. And not too long after we met and realized this was a little bit serious, I met his daughter and her family, and then we even had lunch with Gabe's mother, his mother-in-law, a few weeks after that, because she was in full support of the relationship. So if I wouldn't have had that support, I might have had a little more issue with staying in the relationship.
Well, sure, and it's like I was pointing out, see, you came into the world, you grew up seeing that people were different, they were diverse, whereas this was a family that started out, it was a mom and dad that they came together in what is known as that sweet romantic relationship we seem to embrace in movies and the happily ever after castle in the sky, but then, as you were saying, by the age of 49, which is extremely young actually, for somebody to get onset Alzheimer's, that's sort of their first experience into the world of, oh my goodness, we didn't realize as we're raising our healthy families and everything seems normal, what this really entails. And anybody who has actually been, let's say, in a life where they have had a situation that's other than, let's say, normal, it's hard for them to wrap around it. I think a lot of times that when they experience, let's say it's a friend of yours, and they might have a daughter, for instance, who gets debilitated and is in a wheelchair, that they somehow look at this and they say, well, somehow in a day or a week or a month or hopefully in a year, click, this is all going to be a bad dream and everything's going to be back to the way it is. Right. Something like this, though, and as you write so eloquently, is a slow, heartbreaking, heart-wrenching deterioration that doesn't change no matter how much you wake up and say, is this a bad dream? And this was something that you were really aware of that I think you were also experiencing. This family doesn't seem to understand, although they're now beginning to. This is every day until it's not that anymore.
Exactly. And it's funny because his daughter said before I came into his life, he would call her 5, 7, 10 times a day because he was so lonely. And, he described to me feeling so helpless for such a long time. He's supposed to be the one that can fix things and help her, and there was nothing he could do, like you said. It's a terminal illness. She will die. But the worst part is she's not there until she dies. You have to say goodbye well before her body gives out. And being a young body, she's going to hang on even longer. So absolutely, it was a hard time for him to experience, and he actually did his grieving process, and as his daughter told me and his son told me, they did their grieving process before she actually passed away. They had said their goodbyes. So they were, and I don't mean to sound crass or anything, but they were really just waiting for her to pass away, waiting for her body to finally give up.
And believe me, Tammy, when I say this, I got that.
Yeah,
and people, again, who haven't been in that situation or really haven't experienced what that is, what we're talking about right here, can't know the relief. And it sure, as a societal view, they think, well, that's awfully selfish of you. Well, because you have that point of view, you don't know what this is. Exactly.
And that's the main reason why I wrote the book. It's the judgment of people. Mm-hmm. I wanted people to see what I was to Eric. I wasn't just, let's forget your wife and move on, and let's go, have this great life together, and let's forget about your past. That's not what I was about. I was a support system to him and the family. And for people to judge that, like you're saying, if you're not walking in those shoes, you have no clue what that person is going through. So before you judge someone, take a day in their shoes and try to figure out how it is to live day in and day out without, like you said, the spouse that you thought you were going to live, the rest of your life with.
Now, I think it's important for the listeners to know that your background as far as your spirituality is that you're a devout Christian. You certainly walk the talk. I can see that in your writing in the book, and I thought that was phenomenal and very important to bring up. I myself wouldn't consider myself a devout Christian, but certainly spiritual. Yes, and I embrace anything that helps an individual improve not only who they are and be a better person in the world, but also gets them to awaken to what their special gifts are and to live in service of the world. If it gets you there, you can put any label you want to on it. You're a caregiver. That's your lot in life. That was the spiritual reason that you were put here on this earth. Was to do that. And you did that through nursing. You had, let's say, if you're someone who believes in incarnation or reincarnation, your soul chose this life through your parents so that you could be prepared for that special gift that you have. Now, what I wanted to bring up here that I thought was really enjoyable at the same time is the honesty when it came to the first time that you and Eric met. Okay? Let's talk about that little exchange there, because I thought this was very important, especially in a world of what I would consider to be shallow relationships. I'm here for the love of it, and when that's not there, then I'm out of here. But this one here was interesting because you had a choice here that you could have made, and you made the choice that you did, and I found that to be something people need to hear.
When we met for coffee, and we were sitting outside. I can remember it as if I were there. As we met, and he started talking about gay, and he started tearing up about it. And I could just see the pain on this poor man's face. And I knew that in some capacity I needed to be in his life. If it turned out to be just a friend to help support him, that's what I was going to do. And so I reached out. We both were in tears at that point. I reached out and just kind of pressed his shoulder to show him that I was listening and that I felt my heart was broken for him. I have to say, a lot of my girlfriends who know me and know that I am this caretaker question my motives for choosing to stay with him after I found out about the wife, and because they were questioning, are you just doing this because you're a caretaker? Well, I'm sure that there was a part of me that did it for that. It's not why I fell in love with him. But there's a part of me, like you said, that was put on this earth to be a caretaker. So it gives me an energy, and it's a place that I have to feel that energy in, and it's part of who I am. So was that part of why? Absolutely. But that's almost every relationship in my life. You just have to learn how to set boundaries when you need to set boundaries, and know when not to set boundaries.
Now, when it came to the time that you were really coming together in love, and this was, in the course of many months, even up to a year, then the challenge actually started becoming as to, well, how are our family members going to deal with this? But you were really in the throngs, if you will. You were going to see gay pretty much as often as Eric was going. You were involved in. To me, what I got from your story was this. It was almost as though Gay could see the opportunity to sort of pass on her energy and spirit into a woman that would love her husband as much as she did, who would love her children as much as she did, her grandchildren as much as she did. See, and you can think of an Eastern philosophy ideal, that sort of passing of the spirit, if you will, soul, if you will, to say, I get to carry on this energy, now I can leave this body, and there it is. And it seemed to me as you were writing that you, although being a devout Christian and not knowing if that's one way they think, is that you truly wrote that in such a way that as a reader, I got that. I was like, wow, this is really cool.
Yeah, and let me explain. I was raised a devout Christian, but I call myself spiritual as well. So I'm with you. I'm all about spirituality and healing and energies and things like that. Absolutely. So that is exactly what I was doing. Not only was I letting her husband for her, but like you said, her family. And I did visit her more towards the end than the rest of the family. They just couldn't bear to see her like that. And like I said, they had said goodbye, so they really didn't feel the need to see her because her body deteriorated as well. So when I came into the picture, the way I viewed it was I didn't want anyone to forget Gay. I certainly wanted to embrace her and keep her in the family. The first Christmas we spent together, his house had a niche on the wall, like a little shelf, and she had a Santa collection. So I put all of her Santas in this niche and decorated it with lights and everything because I wanted Gay to be there at Christmas when everyone was at our house. I didn't want her to be forgotten because even though I'd never met the real Gay, I felt her love. And that's one of the reasons why I used to visit her is I wanted her to feel the love that I had to give her from her family with stories or whatever because at that point she was bedridden and hardly ever opened her eyes, and if she did, she just blankly stared. But I would just tell her stories of the children so that she could not only give me the energy to pass on to her children, but to bring it back to her.
Now, speaking of Christmas, I have to point this out. I think it's rather kind of funny and humorous, but you love Christmas by the truckloads.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's talk about that a little bit because that was a concern with you. You were like, oh, my goodness, I'm getting criticized by my own children about all this stuff, and here I'm, being encouraged to bring it in and merge it with Eric's stuff. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I do love Christmas, and it's more about the
by the truckloads. We want people to know this.
Yeah, I'll never forget my ex-husband, what he said when I left the house. He goes, tell Eric I'm so sorry. Because he knew how much I was just taking the Christmas stuff. Let me explain. My ex-husband and I are, to this day, very good friends. We've known each other since we were small children. We just got married too young and outgrew each other. So we're very good friends. And so I'd come to his house to get my Christmas stuff, and like you said, it was a few truckloads. So it's the spirit of Christmas. And when I am feeling that, I decorate to the hilt. I've got stuff in every nook and cranny of the house, and it goes a little crazy sometimes. But I was so excited to see Gay's Santa collection because that was something I felt like we had in common. We loved Santa and we loved Christmas, and so that I loved it. I was very happy to know that she had a little bit of that in her as well. So Eric was a little bit used to it, and he was okay with it. He just thought that, when I started bringing the boxes in, he said, and there's more? Like, there's a lot more.
Crazy stuff there. But, it was really enjoyable as the family came together and you began to realize that they not only accepted you, but they encouraged this because, as they said, I think it was the one daughter was at a point, that she was kind of looking at you in a judgmental way in a way, but then realized, but I've come to accept you because I've never seen my father so happy.
And I would like to explain that. It was the first time we met. And what she had told me afterwards, and it's in the book, was that she wore her mother's coat, her mother's favorite perfume, and she had decided she was not going to like me. But
you can even see the arms crossed and the grimace like, man,
absolutely.
It's only a matter of time before I throw one of those, snowmen at you.
Yeah, and this was before Christmas. But her sons were there. She has 3 sons, and her sons were there, and kids just like me. And so I bonded with them right away. And she said, my heart just melted because I saw how happy my dad was, and you were so good with my boys, and I just loved you. There was, however, a granddaughter later on who was, she's a very strong Christian. I believe Catholic. I can't really attest to that right now because her parents divorced and she is no longer in the family, but I still consider her a granddaughter. But she, at one point, at one Christmas, did voice a protest. She said, I think that Grandpa's wrong. He shouldn't be doing this. Why has he done this? I don't approve. I think it's against the Bible. And so that put a real damper on Christmas that year. And it was a difficult, difficult Christmas. But after her parents, I should explain, Eric's son married a woman who had a little girl when they married. And so that's this little girl. And when they divorced, the first Christmas after their divorce, she came to the house, and it was like it was before that Christmas. So I don't know what changed, but there was a Christmas when she questioned what we were doing, and she actually judged what we were doing. But I understood it. She was protecting her grandmother. But I wanted her to know, and I wrote a letter to her father asking him to show the letter to her why we were doing what we were doing. And I don't know if that ever happened, but so there was a protest in the family. And it hurt. It was a painful time.
Right. And that was a point that I certainly wanted to bring up here in the program, because we've been talking about how you can be considered the other woman. Coming into a man's life where he's still married to a wife who is now deteriorating because of Alzheimer's disease, a very slow, debilitating process in a lot of cases. That person is no longer there anymore. And you're talking about in your book, bleeding hearts. This is what the people who aren't that person are experiencing. Now, what's fascinating is that we have talked about judgment and how people would look at this. Oh, you're the other woman kind of coming in here. What's wrong with this guy? What happened to this? In love and in sickness until death do us part. And in that letter that you wrote to, I'm trying to remember his name now. I got Lexi stuck in my head, and I know that's not right. Rick's, that's the name. Okay.
Oh, his son, yes.
Yeah, his son. That's the one you wrote the letter to. I read that letter, and I was recognizing, how often, as you were saying in the letter, people will take the Bible and they'll just grab the parts that they feel are important. And you are pretty much, you really need to read the whole Bible and live the whole Bible if you're going to do that. And my attitude is the same way about history. If you're going to research and spout off about history, you need to learn about all the history,
right, exactly.
Kind of a thing. And I found that fascinating, what you wrote in there about where that piece of, or that quote comes from, in sickness and in health until death do us part. And I wanted to hit on that because it reminded me of how often people will use, the Bible or religion and the parts they want and get out there and condemn people through judgment about their actions. And it's like, but if you're a Christian, that means that you align with Jesus. Did you see or understand what this guy actually did?
Right.
He certainly wasn't running around judging and condemning people. That's one thing he wasn't doing. So.
Right. And that's what I explained in the letter was, that phrase actually comes from the book of prayer. It doesn't come from the Bible. But I believe in it. But the thing I wish I would have thought about at the time, but I hindsight's 20/20, right? Is Eric was a husband, 100% a gay, in the capacity that she needed him to be. There was no living, they could not live together. I mean, the reason why she ended up in the nursing home at the point she did was she wouldn't let him in the house anymore. She didn't recognize him. So he was her husband in every sense of the word until death do they part. I mean, he never divorced her. We didn't marry till after she passed away. So I'm with you. It's like, don't pick and choose the Bible, and make sure you're quoting from the Bible, actually. But that's the Christianity that I claim. Jesus didn't judge anyone, and that's what he taught us. He taught us to love and accept and not to judge. And she was 14 at the time, so I would never have faulted her at the time or even now. And she was just, standing up for what she believed, and I understood that. I did, and I supported that she was so brave to be able to speak out for her grandmother, because her grandmother couldn't speak. But I know in my heart of hearts that what Eric did is exactly what Gay would have wanted him to do. She would have wanted him to find someone to help share this burden, because she saw her grandmother go through Alzheimer's. She knew exactly what it was like. So I know that she didn't want Eric to go through anything like that, especially alone.
Yeah, very well said. That's for sure. Now, the title of your book is Bleeding Hearts. Now, people looking at this story, again, you've got the people that could be standing outside and kind of judging this, but, this isn't a story about that. Tell us why you chose that title.
It's funny that you bring that up. When I decided to write the book, I was no writer, and I had just kept a journal because it was a painful time for me as well. But one day I looked at it and I thought, this could be a book, and maybe it would help people see that, what a partner could be. And so I wrote like the first 5 chapters, and I thought, maybe I'm just wasting my time. So I found a woman online who helped me get published, and she's a several times published author. And so I emailed her and I said, I'm writing this book. Can you tell me? I'll be glad to pay a fee, whatever. And so she emailed me back and she said, send me what you've written. This is my fee, and I'll let you know if you're wasting your time. I thought, perfect. She said, give me 2 weeks. 2 days later, she emailed me back and she said, I can't wait to turn the next page. You are certainly a storyteller. I'm not charging you for reading it, and I will edit your book myself. So I was thrilled, and so that's why I ended up writing the book, or how I ended up writing the book. But she didn't like the title either. She said, Bleeding Hearts, like Bleeding Heart Liberal, and I said, no. She goes, write me a preface so that I'll understand what this is about. And so I sent her I wrote the preface within a few hours, sent it to her, and she said, I love the title. Now, bleeding hearts are a flower, and they were one of Dave's favorites. And I thought it was appropriate because everybody's hearts were broken. And so I wrote about that in the preface of the book, how she loved bleeding hearts.
Well, I encourage people that they actually take a look and actually read this book so they can understand a huge dynamic that's going on here, especially when it comes to relationships and the idea, what they are, especially when something like Alzheimer's, which is devastating, comes into play, and how the people that are around that person are affected. And in this case here, as you said, it wasn't an easy path, but it's certainly one that laid before you and that you took on. You decided to do that. And I love that picture that we see on your website of you and Erica in Germany, I believe it is. And
yeah, we
very
live
strong
in Germany.
Yeah, very much so. Is there a website people can find out more, Tammy, about how they can get your book, more about your story, and maybe they can contribute their own stories? I'm sure you're finding that becoming more on the horizon now as people share their stories as well.
Absolutely. I have a website, TammyReeves.com, TammyReeves.com. The book, there's a link there, or you can go to Amazon.com. It's on there. It's in Kindle edition, or you can get a paperback. And I just want to encourage people to read it with an open mind, because I think that the problem comes into play when people think that they know what's best for each other, and then you pick up a book like that. It's not going to sing to your heart. You're not going to take it to heart. You're not going to realize what it could mean. So that's the only thing I ask, is just do it with an open mind and an open heart.
Well, absolutely, and I think a lot of times, what I was mentioning earlier in the program, a lot of times people will have that convenience to look at a situation and say, well, I think you should be doing this. Well, have you been in this situation? And most of the time the answer is no. Well, then you don't have any business telling me or anyone else what they should be doing until you're in that situation. And that's certainly what you see here in this book.
And, and it goes across the board. I follow some, like I said, I was a pediatric nurse, so I follow some children who have life-threatening, or actually terminal illnesses, I should say, and their parents, and once the child dies, and I offer support and love and words and whatever I can do. And what I find is, a lot of these parents, they'll see a butterfly and say, oh, that was my daughter today, or I saw my son in the clouds. And then people will just tell them, what's the matter with you? Why are you saying these things? Are you crazy? Your child's in the ground, or whatever they would say. Horrific things. And I think that's another judgment. You're judging on how they're dealing with their grief. So that's what this is all about. This is how Eric chose to deal with his grief. And people can just be so hard. And if you could put yourself in the shoes of somebody who's lost a child, and you thought that butterfly that crossed your path was your child, you're going to grab onto that. And there's nothing wrong with that, absolutely nothing. And no one has the right to tell you that there is something wrong with it.
And not to mention what should be certainly looked at here, in my opinion, with the large magnifying glass, is the selflessness that you had in this situation, willing to step in, to love someone who deeply loved their wife, and to say, I also want to love her as well. And to have that there, most people in relationships, it's just me and them, and that's it. We don't want the rest of it in there. And well, okay. Right. So what about this unconditional love you were talking about here?
Yeah, exactly.
It's not as easy as you think. Quit watching The Bachelor, because that stuff isn't real.
Yeah, exactly. No, yeah. Well, and I had to ask Eric to make some strange. He'd have to accept some things as well. Like my ex-husband being a friend of mine, he thought that was a little weird at first, but he's gotten to know him and appreciates the person who he is. And matter of fact, we were just in the States in October for a visit, because we do live in Germany, and Tim is my ex-husband's name, and he just recently got married in September. We took him and his new bride out to dinner to celebrate, because we were so happy for them, because we love her to death. And actually, a while back when he had first met her, we told him that if he broke up with her, we were going to keep her in the family and get rid of him. So, so this has gone both ways. Eric's had to make some adjustments, too, that are a little bit unorthodox, but worked out so much better for the kids. We have 3 kids together, so it worked out really great that we can still be friends.
You know, and ultimately when you take a look at the whole spiritual path, if you will, that we're certainly put here to learn and embrace and grow from the lessons that lay before us. And I certainly believe this could be true, that if you're unwilling to embrace those lessons that are put before you, that you sort of want to avoid them or forget that they're there, that's where suffering comes in, because when you go into these lessons, whether you like them or not, you realize there's always a gift there, especially since you are living and breathing and getting through that. You realize, you know, I kind of miss that being there. Even as hard as it was, I kind of really do miss that being there, and I'm grateful that that's happening. And that's where gratitude certainly comes in as a big player for something like that.
Oh, I absolutely agree. Yeah, 100%. Matter of fact, that's one of the ideas of a book that I'm thinking about writing is my spiritual journey. Not that it's any more important or impressive than anybody else's, but just something that I feel like I want to put down on paper.
Well, Tammy, and I got to say, you know, from a host of 15 years of Beyond 50 Radio, I've heard and talked with a lot of people about a lot of stories, and I can say it's absolutely necessary, and I say this is true because when you put that out there, somewhere it's going to connect with someone who's going to think they were completely alone with their experiences. They're going to read your story and realize, you mean somebody out there was a lot like me? And it's through that ripple effect, through that dropping of a pebble into the pond, that you don't realize the tremendous influence that you'll have as that ripples out into the world and influences others as well to do the very same thing. Be the light of the world, as they would say. Tammy, thank you so much for joining us here on the program and sharing your story.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. One more time for the listeners, that website.
TammyReeves.com, T-A-M-I, Reeves, R-E-E-V-E-S.com. I'm also on Facebook. You can find me at Bleeding Hearts.
Very good. Bleeding Hearts is the book, a true story of Alzheimer's, family, and the other woman. Our guest today, Tammy Reeves. Tammy, thank you again for being on the program.
Thank you. You have a great day.
You too. We want to thank you, the listeners out there, for joining us. You can discover more. Visit us at Beyond50Radio.com. That is the number 50. We do encourage you to sign up for our weekly e-newsletter and stay up to date with what's going on in the world of Beyond 50, as well as our upcoming programs. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 Radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.